Right now, right now. 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 Oh, I got a real good feeling.
We try to bring you high-quality educational and informational content every single day. Why do you think the price is having such an anemic time? The news story of the hour. Jump onto the chart. Is this the beginning of a massive financial unraveling? We gotta add a little addendum to the show map today. So we start here on the daily. Now, we've been looking at the RSI on Bitcoin's daily chart for the last several days. It always has been, but it's been increasing over the last 50 years since the government has been bigger. Hey guys, what's going on? Jeb here, and welcome back to Coffee and Crypto Live. This is your week daily morning show where we bring you the latest and everything Bitcoin and cryptocurrency. And in today's episode, we are going to be talking about a massive sell signal that has shown up on the weekly chart for Lux Algo. If you guys aren't familiar with Lux Algo, it is one of my favorite technical indicators, and it is a technical indicator I've been using for multiple years to help me understand where the market is going and why the market is going there, and also understand how far the market will move so that we can set up profitable trades. And unfortunately, we do have a sell signal coming in right now on the weekly chart for Lux Algo, as well as a confirmed sell signal on the daily chart, as you know, has already led us 15% to the downside. So the question now becomes, is Bitcoin about to drop even lower? We're going to be talking about all of that and more in today's video. I also want to talk a little bit about what's going on over in Ukraine. The Dutch and the Netherlands have gone ahead, the Dutch and Denmark have gone ahead and approved the transfer of F-16 fighter jets to Ukraine. For anybody who's been following the Ukrainian conflict, you will know that that is one of the largest developments since the beginning of the war. We'll touch on that briefly and how that may impact markets. And we're also going to give you a little bit of an update on the Ripple case. There's a bit of it's kind of a small development, but I just want to touch on that case a little bit. We haven't spoken about it much here on stream, and I think it's very important to the overall perspective of what's going on in crypto. And then there's also a company called Friends.tech. We're going to mention them briefly as well. So let's go ahead and jump straight into it. So glad you could be here this morning. If you're taking time out of your morning to be here, thank you very much for tuning in. If you do enjoy today's stream, I encourage you to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. It helps to support what we're doing here. And I love teaching you guys about trading and investing and understanding these markets. All right. Satchit321 was the first, as you say in chat. Welcome to the chat. Joe Bollier's in chat. Grand Roofing Incorporated is in chat. Philly Skills 1428. Sean O'Brien, Mike Lowry, Dan Nolan say keep your powder dry right now. Drizzy Drake in the stream. Being BTC Crypto Alerts. Alex Nibo, Mike Lowry. I have the Beholder, Dutch XRP. Your name touches on two different things we'll be talking about today. We'll be talking about the Dutch, and we'll also be talking about XRP. So shout out to you, Dutch XRP. You are the highlight of today's show, my friend. Justin Shaw said, getting better at showing up during the stream and not after. Something about the lives. Yes, it's fun being here. John Stoley, 1, said, good morning, Jeb. Hope all is well. Classic IT guy. Valerie Valenzuela. Midtown Cabinetry and Designs. Simeon Hogg. Hagen, sorry. Lee Bishop, Leroy, Turabit. Man, I'm trying to read everybody's name, and every time I read one name, somebody else shows up. Robert Kehoe's in chat. Good morning to all of you. All right, let's talk a little bit about Bitcoin. As you guys know, Bitcoin has had a drop over just the last several days. On Friday, Bitcoin began a major drop. On Thursday, Bitcoin began a major drop, dropped a little over 10%. We're down about 11% over the last 7 days. But the good news is Bitcoin is still performing very, very well over the course of this year, still being up around 50 to 60% so far this year. I want to say it's about 56% up year to date. As you know, Bitcoin started the year around $15,600 back on December 31st. Bitcoin's trading around, $16,600, rallied 90%. Now we're still up over 50% from where we began the year. And even though we had that major drop, we have put in motion a higher low, which is absolutely a good sign. We love to see it. I am currently not at all worried about the health of the market. I think that Bitcoin is doing just fine. I do just want to put that out there. First and foremost, to dispel any fear that's going on, I personally am not concerned in the slightest about the health of Bitcoin. I think it's doing a phenomenal job. In fact, you can even see a trend line right here, which has been very pivotal in Bitcoin over recent times. Just a couple of trend lines there that we can look at. Now, we're going to come back to the charts a little bit later, but first of all, I want to kind of give you a brief overview. It's the beginning of the week, so I'd like to kind of give you an overview of what happened last week and what we're going to be looking forward to this week. All right, a couple of things that took place last week that were very important. Of course, we had the Jacoby Spot Bitcoin ETF going live in Amsterdam. Amsterdam has obviously had a lot of news coming out of it lately. We'll be talking about what came out of the Netherlands later on today as well. It flew west, I suppose you could say, flew east. Last week, we saw the Jacoby Spot Bitcoin ETF come online, and we also saw Coinbase approved by the NFA, the National Futures Association, for an FCM, a futures commission market, for Coinbase to run a Bitcoin and a Ethereum futures market, which is very, very humorous to me, because at the exact same time that the Securities and Exchange Commission, the regulatory body over spot markets, is attacking Coinbase in legal proceedings for operating unregistered securities, an unregistered securities exchange, you're seeing the CFTC's NFA giving an FCM to Coinbase. Of course, the CFTC is over derivatives. The SEC is over the spot markets. It's very funny that while Coinbase is coming under attack by the SEC, the CFTC is giving them an approval for something that they asked for 2 years ago and didn't really give them much pushback at all. So those are a couple of big stories, massive, massive, massive developments, to be honest with you, what happened last week, having to do with the adoption of Bitcoin and cryptocurrency and regulatory clarity around the space. Very excited about that. Now, some of the things that we're going to look for this week. We're continuing to look at the Ripple case. It is continuing. Of course, there was the summary judgment posted by the court a little over a month ago, back on July 13th, I want to say it was, somewhere around there, July 13th, 14th, something like that. Right now, what we're seeing happen is that the SEC is trying to file for it's pronounced an interlocutory appeal in the middle of the case, because there's still proceedings going on with the current XRP case. The SEC has applied for an interlocutory appeal to an appellate court so that the court, the higher court, can review some of the proceedings going on in the current case. Ripple's executives are kind of pushing back at that, saying, well, wait a minute, why do you need to send this to another court when this court case is not even done? You don't need interlocutory review. We need to finish the court case here, and then following the rules, if you want to go ahead and appeal this to another court, then you go right ahead and do that. You have every right to do that. Anybody has the ability to appeal any case in the United States judicial system, but the SEC is trying to kind of jump ahead and say, hey, we're going to go take this before a bigger court so that the bigger court can say, no, you little court, you're doing this wrong. And then the ruling 3 in favor of Ripple, 1 in favor of XRP. Basically, there are 4 counts. 3 were ruled in favor of Ripple. 1 was ruled in favor of the SEC. They essentially are saying, hey, we're going to, in the middle of the case, go for interlocutory review. That's basically a review in the middle of proceedings so that they can kind of bring down this authority from on high of, oh, look, the appellate court says that you got this wrong. So then they can put pressure on the judge to say, hey, you got this wrong. You need to look at this differently. We're going to continue to look at that. The judge did approve the SEC to go for that interlocutory review through that process. We shall see what happens with that. Definitely something we're going to be looking for updates. That's kind of the next phases of what's going to happen with the Ripple case. Now, one of the last things I want to mention that's going to happen this week that we're going to want to pay attention to, actually 2 things, they're both related. First and foremost, the Jackson Hole Summit is on, I want to say, Friday. So that is the summit that takes place out in Wyoming at Jackson Hole every single year of some of the most powerful economic policy setters, economists, the financial world over. The people that run the economy show up there, and of course the Federal Reserve and the FOMC show up there as well. Jackson Hole is the place where you typically see if there's going to be some kind of major policy change or major policy decision coming out of the Fed. You're normally going to see something take place there. The Fed Chair Jerome Powell warned of a recession last year at Jackson Hole. That there was one that was very possibly going to occur, and there was basically this sentiment that that's something that the market is just going to have to deal with, because if there is a recession, that's something that the Fed is willing to undergo because they are trying to get interest rates under control. Now we're going to see what happens, because at the same time that we saw the interest rates hiking and the CPI coming down, the economy in data terms anyways actually remained relatively strong. We've seen jobs stay relatively strong. There's about 8 million job vacancies right now that have not been filled. There is a glut of underemployment where people are being underemployed. For example, somebody with a bachelor's in finance is working at McDonald's. That's underemployment, right? There's a lot of underemployment going on, but broadly speaking, people have jobs. The unemployment is actually very low. It's returned to pre-pandemic levels. And so when we're seeing this summit at Jackson Hole, it's interesting. It's going to be very interesting to see what Jerome Powell says. And we're definitely going to be paying very close attention to it for any nuggets of wisdom that we can gather from that. Jerome Powell is one of the most powerful men on the planet. He sits on the FOMC. He is the chairman of the FOMC. The FOMC is basically what the Fed is, the Federal Open Market Committee. You've got several different people that are appointed to the FOMC by the president and approved by the Senate, and then you have 5 banking chairs. One of them's from the New York Fed, and then 4 others are rotating from the other 11 Federal Reserve banks around the country. There's 12 of them. The FOMC presides over them. It's the central bank over the decentralized central banks. He's the head of the FOMC, and so when he speaks at Jackson Hole, it's going to be something that we're going to want to pay very close attention to. So that was last week. This is this week. We've also got some economic data coming out about housing. There's a bunch of different data that we'll talk about as it comes out, if it is at all interesting and relevant. But the thing that we're going to be talking about quite extensively today is the technical landscape on Bitcoin, because as I said, Bitcoin is currently facing a sell signal on Lux Algo. So let's go ahead and start out there. I think it's important that we start here because this is going to help us to understand the climate of crypto, if you will. As you know, I like to talk about the climate of crypto. And then from there, from understanding the climate of crypto, then we can begin to understand where Bitcoin is going to go next and how all of these news stories that we're going to speak about today will impact the Bitcoin and the cryptocurrency market. Again, if you enjoy today's show or if you are enjoying today's show, consider hitting that like button. It really helps to support us in the YouTube algorithm. Consider dropping a comment. And even before we get started, I'd love to hear your opinion on what are some of the things that you are seeing going on in markets right now. What are some of the things that you see going on in crypto right now that are of interest to you? Are you interested in seeing what's going to happen at Jackson Hole? Are you interested in seeing what CPI is going to look like? Are we going to have that increase in CPI as I expect we will as a result of the energy sector cooling off with its deflation? I would love to hear your opinions and your comments in chat, and also any questions that you guys have. Lee Bishop said, Jeb, the cracks are finally visible in the stock market. How long before a massive sell-off truly affects the crypto market? Great question. Let's start there, and then we'll jump into Lux Algo. Okay, so the cracks in the stock market. How shall I go about answering this? The United States stock market is one of the most important entities in the entire economy because it is the backbone of the economy. The United States stock market is made up of the companies that are publicly traded in the United States, which makes up like 80 to 90%, not that much, but at least 50 to 60% of United States GDP. You know, there is a rise of small business lately, but broadly speaking, publicly traded companies are the United States economy. So the stock market is one of the best indicators for the economy. And so there are some cracks in the economy. One of them that I mentioned was the fact that we have this advent of underemployment, where it's very difficult for some people to find jobs in what they are specialized in. So again, somebody might have a master's degree in finance, or they might be an economist, whatever it may be, they just may not be able to find a job that should be paying them as high as they would be otherwise. Broadly speaking, one of the biggest cracks that I would be seeing is the housing market. There's something going on right now that many people call a mortgage winter. Over half of people in the United States have an interest rate locked in because, thank God, people stopped doing variable rate interest rates. I mean, people still offer it, but please, for the love of God, never get a variable rate interest rate. It's just a terrible, 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 terrible idea. Anyway, unless you're trying to bet that interest rates are going to go down. But they haven't started going down yet, so don't go there just yet. There is something called a mortgage winter going on, and that is almost a time bomb on the United States economy. Because right now there's a phenomenon going on where housing prices have gone up with inflation, and with just the general growth of the housing market, and also housing prices have gone up in certain areas even more dramatically than others. So, for example, we live in one of the fastest growing places in the country, and that is Florida. And in Florida, we live in one of the fastest growing places in Florida. So our property value is just going up dramatically. You see things like Austin, Texas, the Texas Triangle down there. You got Dallas, Fort Worth. Houston, Austin, all those areas. There's a huge amount of growth going on there. There's a massive amount of growth in the housing market at the same time that interest rates are going up. So the buy pressure is major, has been major over the last 2 years because people know interest rates are going up, and so they want to buy a house now, lock in a low interest rate. That's what we did. We may have ended up renting for another several years, but I saw the market and I said, okay, interest rates at the time we bought our house were about 2%. They were climbing aggressively. I said, they're going to be at 6% before long, and you're going to have to get a mortgage at 8%. We were going to buy our house now, and I'm glad we did because we have 5 1/8. It's not 3 like some people are locked into, but we have a very low interest rate compared to what you're able to get on the market right now. When interest rates plateau and when interest rates from the Fed specifically start to come down, then that is going to have a huge, huge, huge impact on the housing market, and is going to lead, in my opinion, to a major amount of selling pressure from the United States housing market, because now everybody who wanted to move for whatever reason, maybe they're trying to get out of California, maybe they're trying to move for work because the pandemic changed their job title, maybe AI is revolutionizing their industry and they have to move into a different field, whatever it is, why ever people may be moving, there's going to be a huge change in the housing market, because you're going to see all that sell pressure from people moving once the interest rates come down and they're able to relocate to a house that they can actually afford and that they can actually get a low interest rate in. And that's going to lead to a lot of sell pressure. I think you'll see a big drop on the stock market probably in about 18 to 24 months. All right, so that's one of the other cracks I see in the stock market, is most importantly the housing market. Right now that mortgage winter is going on. That's not going to last forever though. As far as other cracks in the stock market, there's also, of course, the fact that the S&P 500 is not reclaimed all-time high. When the S&P 500 does reclaim all-time high, and it is a matter of when, not if, when the S&P 500 does reclaim all-time high, we'll be back in more long-term bullish territory. Right now, of course, the S&P 500 has been undergoing a correction down to baseline around 430. 430 has been a very important level of support and resistance historically on the S&P, and we've fallen back down there now. If you are a stock market investor, it's not a bad idea to start putting some of your investments that you maybe have had in dry powder right here. But don't forget that a recession is still very much possible, and we could very much see another drop. So it's not a bad idea to have some dry powder on the side, but broadly speaking, time in the market beats timing the market. Being a stock market investor is one of the most proven ways to build wealth over time in the history of mankind. I'm not going to bet against the history unless I have a very good reason. And although I do have certain issues with the way the economy has been run by our government over the last 8 years, I believe, broadly speaking, the stock market is still a great place to invest money. On this drop, you could be getting in about 10%, about 6%, 10% is Bitcoin, about 6% lower than where it was, up at 460. So if you're buying something that tracks the market, SPAIX for Fidelity, for example, I think that's the ticker symbol, or you're just buying the S&P 500, the ETF trust itself, whatever you're buying, the stock market is, broadly speaking, one of the best ways to build wealth in the long term. So we'll talk more about other things that may have an impact on the markets here in a little bit, but let's go ahead and keep going here. Thank you for that question, my friend. I, the Beholder, said supply and demand also applies to a degree. Absolutely. Absolutely. TUI Enterprises said, I own a house in Orlando. I bought a 2,500 square foot house for $216 in 2015. It's now worth $500K. Orlando is absolutely exploding. I don't know if you guys have been to Orlando recently. It's blowing up. We were down there for the 4th of July for Disney. We went to Disney World for the 4th of July. That city is exploding. It's nuts. If you have the ability to get real estate in Orlando, I'm not a real estate financial advisor, but you heard it here first in chat, guys. I'll never sell it because there's nowhere to go and everything is too expensive. Exactly. Everything's too expensive now because so much of that growth has gone on, but you're seeing a lot of the suburbs of Orlando and of Tampa growing massively. So that's just some local real estate insight. But in fact, I'm a little bit off track, but this is interesting to me, so I'm going to pursue it just for a second. Where is it? I'm trying to think. Wesley Chapel. Wesley Chapel right now down in Tampa is exploding. I've been down there. It's crazy. It's blowing up. All right, so let's talk a little bit about Bitcoin. As I said, I want to talk about this Lux Algo sell signal, and then we're going to talk about some of the other events going on in crypto and in the broader world right now that I believe are going to be influential on Bitcoin. So, as you know, Bitcoin had been above this longer-term uptrend for some time, and by for some time, I mean since the beginning of the year. Bitcoin did finally break below this uptrending level of support. If you remember back to a couple of weeks ago, we were broadly expecting that Bitcoin could pull all the way back down to $25,000. If it did not hold this uptrending level of support. We basically said, look, if it doesn't hold this uptrending level of support, it's going to 25 to 26, and that's what's happened. So Bitcoin has broken below that uptrend. There's all kinds of reasons that you can point to. One reason that people are pointing to is because it came out in one paragraph at the bottom of some random Wall Street Journal article about SpaceX's finances. Some dude found this. It said at the bottom that SpaceX had owned, that they had marked down the value of their $373 million worth of their Bitcoin, which they then later sold. And so it kind of put this question in everybody's mind that everyone started talking about this. You saw all the crypto YouTubers talking about it. Well, did SpaceX own Bitcoin? Yes, they did own Bitcoin. Do they still own Bitcoin? The article isn't clear. I kind of think the Wall Street Journal did that to get their name out there and to get some attention because it was written in such a way that you could interpret it two ways, and it sparked a ton of debate. Does SpaceX still own Bitcoin or not? We don't know, but On the same day that that article was posted, Bitcoin started dropping. This is kind of what I was talking about over the last 2 weeks, where Bitcoin's going to move, but it's going to need some kind of catalyst. There needs to be some kind of catalytic event. And the good news is this catalytic event, even though it moved Bitcoin to the downside, broadly speaking, may actually be a very bullish factor. Now, before we even get onto Lux Algo, I want to start a little bit further out and look at the Bollinger Bands on the on the weekly chart. The weekly chart Bollinger Bands have some very interesting stories to tell. Normally, in history, when the weekly chart Bollinger Bands become very, very constricted, I'm just kind of putting some vertical lines here to represent general periods of time that we've seen very constricted Bollinger Bands on Bitcoin. You can see a few of the different times, even in recent memory, that we've seen very, very, very constricted Bollinger Bands, right around the most constricted times. You can see in almost every single case, they end up being continuation signals. Let's go back to the beginning. We're on the Bitstamp chart. Bitstamp's been around since before Dart has been around. Like, it's so funny. You know, when people use the phrase older than dirt, that you don't actually have to be that old to be older than some dirt. Like the dirt, our house was built in 2018. I'm older than the dirt that house was built on because it wasn't there in 2018. When I was born, it was a cow pasture, right? I'm older than that dirt. So anyway, Bitstamp is older than some dirt. It's not as old as me. I'm not that old, but it is older than dirt in the terms of cryptocurrency. So we have a long-term perspective here. As you can see, every single time, if I recall correctly, we shall see ourselves, that we have seen Bollinger Bands constrict just ridiculously close. You can see right here, it ended up being a long-term continuation signal. Continuation signal. Continuation signal. We have an uptrend going into the Bollinger Band squeeze, a uptrend going out of it. Now, this is one exception, actually. We have a lot of constriction down here at the bottom of the market where we're reversing from bearish to bullish. But to be honest, you started moving to the upside, and then you start moving to the upside again. Yes, you can consider these two signals to be relevant, but broadly speaking, Bitcoin was kind of starting to move to the upside as it moved into these Bollinger Bands. It was moving sideways, and then it started going up. We saw a constricted Bollinger Bands here, bullish movement. Constricted Bollinger Bands here, bullish movement. Constricted Bollinger Bands here, bearish movement, but the market was already moving bearish. So it was a continuation pattern once again. You can see the trend here is very much your friend. Over and over and over again, Bitcoin does the exact same thing. Repeats the trend that happened before the constriction of volatility, moving out of the volatility, which makes sense because sideways trading oftentimes acts as a continuation pattern. So that's a basic principle of technical analysis that you can take away from this. So it's no surprise that Bollinger Bands would have this pattern. Similarly, even in recent memory, we see the constriction of volatility, downtrend before, downtrend after, constriction of volatility, downtrend before, FTX comes in and crashes the market. Now, the reason I bring this up is because we're seeing some of the most constricted volatility on Bitcoin that we've seen in a very long time. And as you'll recall, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 vertical lines here, and only one of them represents a reversal. The other 9 are continuation patterns. That's a 90% likelihood based on those 10 pieces of data. And I haven't cherry-picked them. I've just found the closest points of convergence. About a 90% likelihood that a sharp convergence on weekly chart Bollinger Bands is going to lead to a rally. We have a very sharp convergence of Bollinger Bands right now as we've been trading sideways for a month and a half. Very low volatility. The trend moving into that convergence is bullish. The trend moving out, therefore, we would predict is bearish. So what's going on with this red candlestick? Is this something that we should be scared of or not? Looking on the daily chart, we do have a confirmed sell signal. That confirmed sell signal came in on Wednesday. It was confirmed by Thursday's candlestick. That sell signal gave us a take profit, which we have already hit. This is important. If you look back in time, Bitcoin oftentimes has trouble, but oftentimes does not go past its take profit for the first sell signal of the correction. You can see this right here. I'll just go ahead and outline it because it's going to disappear in a second. Is the sell signal from this drop. Bitcoin dropped down and touched it as its top. We have the buy signal come in. Great. But you can see this is the section that this buy signal, which began this drop, gave us. Bitcoin went into the first half of it because the bears are weaker than the bulls right now because we're in a predominantly longer term uptrend. Same thing happened over here, except even more obviously. You didn't even come close to the take profit. Not even close. Didn't even touch it. And then here when we see a sell signal, didn't even touch the take profit. So Bitcoin on its sell signals has a lot of difficulty hitting the take profit. And if it does hit the take profit, it very rarely gets below the middle line. For us, that'd be about $25,000, which is a level that makes sense because that's the bottom that we hit on June 15th. 24.8. We also have a level down here at 22.808. If you remember, 22.808 is a very important level because it represents the high that we set back here on the 13th of September. It also represents, broadly speaking, a kind of a mid-level of the trading that took place in January, February, and March. It is my assertion, therefore, that Bitcoin is pretty close to the bottom of its drop. I think that Bitcoin is going to be potentially bottoming out of $1,000 to $2,000 lower, but I think with all likelihood, Bitcoin will, but with most likelihood anyway, Bitcoin will be dropping down to 24.8 at the lowest, and then holding there. Even though we have that sell signal on Lux Algo. But why am I saying that despite there being a sell signal on Lux Algo? Jeb, don't you believe in Lux Algo? Aren't you encouraging us to buy Lux Algo? You should. You should buy Lux Algo using the annual plan and coupon code JEB30, J-E-B-B 30. You will save 70%. Instead of paying 60-something, 65, 66 bucks a month, you'll pay 21 if you average it all out. They're 21, 22, somewhere in that range. You will save a ton of money. So you should definitely sign up for it. So why am I saying that, oh, I think it's already... Well, here's the deal. The Lux Algo signal was vindicated within 48 hours of showing up. It's already happened. Saw the sell signal. Trend catcher turned red, confirmed it. All right. That sets off my radar. Says, okay, Lux Algo is confirmed. Great. We're on a roll. Where are we going? We're going here. Guess what? We went there. We've been there. We've done that. We got the postcard. Bitcoin has dropped down into the take profit zone. So from that standpoint, Lux Algo was vindicated. Lux Algo was right. Not from that standpoint. What am I saying from that standpoint? Like there's a valid other argument. The fact is that Lux Algo said we were going to drop down there, and we did. The indicator worked. It's that simple. It's that simple. So it makes sense then that I would be able to say, okay, I think we're getting close to the bottom. We might not be quite in yet, but I think we're close. And I wouldn't be surprised at all to see us hold above our previous level at 24,800. If we do drop below 24,800 and we start setting lower lows, yeah, that might bring some bearishness. Yeah, we might drop a few $1,000s. But guess what, guys? The fundamental landscape has not changed. And by the way, if you want to argue that it's changed, it's only changed for the good. We've seen a spot Bitcoin ETF come online. We've got Coinbase able to launch futures. Do you hear that? That's a huge deal. You've also got the fact that the halving and the election are both ever approaching. Why the election? I mean, you probably understand why I'm so excited about the halving showing up, but why the election? Well, come the election, we're probably going to see a change in power. Just to be honest with you, everybody thinks Biden is like old and smelly, and so that I'm not commenting on the politics. I'm just saying that across the aisle, everybody's like, wow, he's getting old. And so it's not going to be surprising if there is a change in leadership. Oftentimes what happens, and I'm speaking about this from a historical standpoint, not even from a political one. Oftentimes what happens if you are in a conflict, if you're in warfare, you don't change the president because you don't want to risk somebody coming in with a new idea and making things even worse. So typically, if you're in the middle of the Great Depression, with FDR, you leave that guy in power. FDR was in office for 3.5 terms, right? He was the longest serving president in American history. During the Second World War, you typically don't change presidents in the middle of a major conflict. The fact of the matter is that when you have a conflict, oftentimes you see the incumbent win. When there is a period of seeming stability, then oftentimes that's where you start to see parties flip. And it would not surprise me at all if Trump won. And I'm not saying he should. I'm not saying he shouldn't. Again, I'm not commenting on the politics here. I'm just telling you it would not surprise me at all if he did win, believe it or not. Even if he doesn't, it would not surprise me if for some reason, if the case that he's involved in ends up going through and he's in jail or something, he can't be president. If that doesn't happen, it would not surprise me at all to see some kind of populist conservative of that kind of energy, maybe a little more polite, get into office with some more libertarian policies getting into office. It would not surprise me. Why does that matter? Well, if you do have a conservative in office, if you do have a Republican in office rather than a liberal Democrat, then what you're probably going to see is you're probably going to see a shakeup at the SEC. You're probably going to see Gary Gensler no longer being the chairman. Gary Gensler is a staunch, hardline, absolutist cryptocurrency hater. I mean, the dude is sipping the haterade just like it's Kool-Aid. The guy he hates crypto. Is what it seems. It seems like he is just out to get crypto. The fact is, it's it's going to be difficult for a Bitcoin ETF to be approved in that environment. It's much more likely, in my opinion, that a Bitcoin ETF is going to be approved under Republican leadership, because a Republican is probably going to put somebody who is more fiscally conservative, more fiscally independent as the chairman of put them in the position of the chairman of the SEC, and that person is probably going to be more likely to approve a spot Bitcoin ETF. If you do see a spot Bitcoin ETF go online in the United States, you're likely going to see Bitcoin go to $100,000 within 24 months of that occurring. And the reason for that is because it's going to allow everyone to buy Bitcoin. What is an ETF? Why is it so important? Spot Bitcoin ETF. Obviously, you know what Bitcoin is, trading Bitcoin. It's not so obvious because you can say Bitcoin ETF and it's actually trading Bitcoin miners. You can say a Bitcoin trust and it's actually got companies that hold Bitcoin in it, but we're talking about a spot Bitcoin ETF. Literally, the only thing it would hold is Bitcoin. An ETF is an exchange-traded fund. You basically have the ability to buy and sell it on a stock exchange or on a brokerage or with a brokerage account like a stock. So it'd be very easy to say, all right, I'm going to buy 100 shares of Bitcoin, right? Does that sound weird or what? Buy 100 shares of the BlackRock Bitcoin ETF. Buy 100 shares of the Van Eck Bitcoin ETF, whatever. That would allow portfolio managers, 401ks, people managing their own Roth IRAs, financial planners, financial advisors the world over, well, pretty much in the United States, but also kind of the world over, because a lot of people have access to American markets, to be able to buy Bitcoin in a way that would actually impact the price of Bitcoin. The reason that that's such a big deal is because you have so many people right now, 30 and under, even 40 and under, that understand Bitcoin well enough and also are making a ton of money and are in the prime of their earnings. They're starting to get into the prime of their earnings. Most of the time, people make the most of their money in their 40s and 50s. They've already bought the house. It might be paid off. Their kids are in college. Great. They've got nothing to spend money on. All they do is put it in the market. Every year, the people that understand crypto get a year older, and a year closer to that. Demographically, it becomes a concern. It becomes a benefit to the Bitcoin cause. Those people are going to buy into Bitcoin on the Bitcoin spot Bitcoin ETF when it gets launched, and because it's a spot Bitcoin ETF, because it's physically backed, because it's the SEC's debacle, not the CFTC's. It'd almost be better if the CFTC were the ones that hated crypto and not the SEC, because what really matters are not the futures markets. The derivatives markets do not lead to adoption of Bitcoin. They don't drive the price of Bitcoin up. They just are trading the shadows of crypto. The SEC and the spot markets, the SEC and the markets, they regulate the spot market for Bitcoin is what matters. So again, two things out in the future. You've got the halving coming. You've also got an election coming. Maybe with that election, we'll see a shakeup in leadership at the SEC. Be very interesting to see. All right. Susie Bonham said they wrote down, which means they claimed losses suffered. It does not mean they sold it. If you look back when they announced, when the announcement came out that they now own BTC, it was during the upcycle. Yes. So what the article said is that I'd have to find it. Well, let me see if I can find it, just so I can quote it directly. It's the phrasing. Here it is. I found it. Wall Street Journal over in business says this. Yeah, I'll just show you the article, just so I can read it verbatim. I can remember facts and figures. I can't quote it directly. The document also shows SpaceX wrote down the value of Bitcoin it owns by a total of $373 million last year in 2021 and has sold the cryptocurrency. The question everybody's wondering, and I talked about this last week, just a quick rehash, and has sold the cryptocurrency. Does that mean and has sold the cryptocurrency as in has sold the Bitcoin, as in has sold all the Bitcoin, or has sold the cryptocurrency as in the $373 million that they wrote down the value of? Or that they wrote, so it's very confusing language here. Have they sold, and another way to look at it, have they sold the cryptocurrency and as in have they sold all the Bitcoin, or have they sold the cryptocurrency as in they've sold some of the crypto? You know, you can say, I sold the stock. Does that mean you sold all the stock? Or does that mean you sold one share of the stock? Who knows? They were not very clear. So that's kind of where everybody's wondering, I wonder what's going on. All right. So let's see here. My main concern with our nation is the corruption of the alphabet agencies at the highest level. You got the CIA, the NSA, the NFA, you've got the CFTC, the SEC, the IRS, Yes, there's quite a lot of that. All right. Okay. Cool. So what we were talking about here, of course, is the shorter term perspective with the longer term perspective in play. That's what really matters here. What's going on in short is the Bitcoin has dropped because of some fundamental news that scare people. Bitcoin had been trading sideways. Remember, another concept: sideways trading without some kind of large break to the upside to prove bullishness oftentimes is a bearish continuation pattern. We saw that continuation pattern continue. Wow. I mean, that's revolutionary, guys. From here, what you're going to see probably happen is you're probably going to see some stabilization over the next couple of weeks. I'm not trading this. Staying out of this market. Let the market get settled. Let it get itself arranged. Then we're going to see what happens from there. We're going to need to see some more market structure because we've broken out of our previous market structure. We need to let the market completely reset. It's total reset. Are people going to buy this? Are they not? Are they going to short it? Are they going to long it? We're going to see. The long-term perspective is things only get better with time for Bitcoin. Why? The halving is coming. The SEC will eventually have new leadership. The use case for Bitcoin is even more apparent than ever. Let me just pause on that one. The Fed has had target 2% for inflation for 30 years, since the 90s. And they largely hit that target in the 2000s to the point where they were hitting about 1 to 1.5% inflation. People were worried, okay, are we going to slip into de-inflation? De-inflation is a spiral that's actually very dangerous for an economy because it's hard to get out of. It's a little bit like an aircraft stalling. You have to pull some very fancy maneuvers to get out of that position. Because when you start to go into deflation, then people think that their currency is going to go down, so they don't spend, which leads to less spending, which brings down GDP, which leads to more deflation. It's a cycle that's not very good. Kind of the happy medium you find is around 0 to 2%. So the Fed wants to hit target 2%. It's okay if they're a little below. It's okay if they're a little above. In their mind, they want to hit target 2%. Now, there are decent reasons for trying to achieve 0 to 2% inflation. It's very low inflation rate, but it does mean that there's not going to be much incentive to buy Bitcoin because one of the biggest draws of Bitcoin is its anti-inflation principles. There are others, of course. Its ability to transact large amounts of money for very low fees, its ability to transact internationally with no barriers, it being unhackable. Somebody tried to argue with me a few weeks ago that Bitcoin was hackable. I was like, okay, yeah, you go ahead and prove me how it's hackable. Or SHA-256 was. It's like, okay, how is it hackable? How is SHA-256 hackable? Do you have a supercomputer more powerful than every single other thinking machine on the planet? No, you don't. Okay. Sorry. Anyway, the Fed having to raise interest rates in fighting the inflation that they brought on the economy in an attempt to resurrect the economy from the pandemic brought on a huge resurgence in, not a huge resurgence, a huge revolution in interest in Bitcoin because, well, if the inflation is going to be at 10%, I need to protect myself somewhere. And Bitcoin came in clutch. It worked. You know, we saw interest on the United States dollar. Inflation on the United States dollar hit almost 10%. Bitcoin rallied 523%. You had money in Bitcoin. You did better than inflation. Not only did you beat inflation, you also beat the market hand and fist. Not even close. It's ridiculous how much money you made if you were in Bitcoin back in 2021. And that'll happen again if we ever see a major inflationary cycle, I think, especially since we have that historical precedent. In the 2010s, Bitcoin grew steadily despite there being remarkably, almost historically low interest rates, inflation, I'm sorry. It managed to grow remarkably anyway. In the 2020s, inflation is going to be a lot harder to get back down to 2%. There's a huge amount of industrial build out going on right now in the United States, which is inflationary. There's a huge amount of spending going on right now, which is inflationary. There's an inflationary cycle where prices go up, and so people think, man, we should raise prices, and that makes inflation hard to get under control. We have an artificially low understanding of what inflation is, sitting at 3.2% on all items. On all items, but core inflation is sitting at, I think, 4.7. I believe it's 4.7. Everybody looks at headline inflation. Oh, it's 3.2. Great. That's almost target 2%. Well, actually, it's probably better that we look at the 4.7 because the only reason it's down at 3.2 is because energy is so low. The only reason energy is so low is because of the fracking revolution, the fact that we brought onshore all kinds of petrochemical companies. You know why? Because they're going bankrupt in Germany. They're all moving over here. And so the petrochem sector is not inflationary right now, but that's a blip in history. That's not going to be there forever. In 12 to 18 months, it's going to be inflationary again, and you're going to be dealing with that 4.7 number. So inflation is going to go back up in the next 6 months. All of that to say, the 2020s are I don't want to be too bleak, but bleak decade for humanity. It's going to be a very turbulent decade. We're kind of looking at the teens, like for an individual. We're kind of the world is trying to rediscover itself. It went off to India to smoke some weird herb and found apple. Like, it's trying to figure out what it is because globalization is collapsing. The Chinese are in dire straits. For the first time, they just slipped into de-inflation, and that's not going to stop anytime soon. The Chinese are screwed. And so when you look at global markets, they're going to be in turmoil this decade. And so it's going to lead to a lot of opportunity for Bitcoin because even though 1 to 2% inflation is actually not a terrible thing for the economy, you have to expand the money supply somewhat when there's more people because they use more money. Because if you've got $100 for 100 people, everybody gets $1. If you got 200 people, now they only get 50 cents. You need to maintain some degree of liquidity and lubrication in the market. Some inflation is necessary, and we saw that even with gold, by the way, because you're always mining new gold, right? So there was inflation with gold. Gold is inflationary. Don't become a gold bug and think it's not inflation. It's inflationary too, right around 2%. Funny how the numbers work out. But the purpose for Bitcoin, one of the main purposes for Bitcoin is to decentralize the finance into the position where you have control over it, to embed the principles of the economy into basically natural law, which is how you drive capitalism in the first place when you're laissez-faire and you don't screw with it too much. And at the same time, be a place where people can flee inflation. And so all of those things are draws that are going to be very important this decade because when you're trying to flee inflation, inflation is going to be a huge concern this decade the world over, especially if you're anywhere in, say, the Middle East, China, Ukraine, Russia, Europe, the United States, South America, Europe, Australia. I think Australasia. I pretty much just said the whole world, right? All of those areas are dealing with inflation that is systemic and is going to be very difficult to get under control by just turning a dial at the Fed. Doesn't work that way. There's a lot more going on. At the same time, when that occurs, you are going to see distrust of the Fed. You are going to see distrust of our central banking system. And so that will lead people to bank alternatives like Bitcoin. And at the same time, one of the final points I will make is that over the course of this decade, you're going to see quite a lot of destabilization from the point of view of the currency. Whenever you see an unstable economy, whenever you see an unstable world, you almost always see a more unstable currency. We're seeing that happen in Russia, for example. The ruble is down over 50% from when the war started. It doesn't mean much because you can't trade the ruble on Forex markets, really, because they've shut down and turned into a closed wartime economy. But it's still relevant. All of these factors drive people to Bitcoin. People that become disenfranchised by the government become enfranchised by Bitcoin, financially speaking. So, we have a bearish sell signal showing up on Lux Algo. Bitcoin dropped. Is it going to continue? Maybe a little bit. Maybe for the next couple of days. I could see Bitcoin trying to find its bottom here over the next several days. I would not be surprised to see a drop down to 24.8. You do have bearish MACD, bearish RSI. On the 3-daily chart, you have bearish RSI, bearish MACD. Weekly chart, same deal. I believe that you will see some stabilization down here. We've basically been trading perfectly sideways. Again, a return to the lack of volatility. You will probably see one or two more major movements before you see a turnaround and go bullish. Again, we could drop a couple $1,000. It's not the end of the world, but I do believe that this decade is shaping up to be a very difficult decade for humanity. But I also believe that Bitcoin is shaping up to be one of the major solutions. One final point I wanted to make, I mentioned this earlier. Ukraine's getting F-16s. That's a huge development. They're going to be getting 19 from the Netherlands. I believe it's 19 from the Netherlands. Let me check. Sorry. The Danes are going to be giving 19. The Dutch are going to be giving 42. So that's a total of 61 F-16 fighter aircraft over the next 3 years. Some of those are going to be introduced as late as into 2025. Those are not going to be relevant for this season of fighting because it takes a long time to build the supply chain and the spare parts and supply chain lines and the systems that are necessary to support a modern fighter aircraft like the F-16. At least the frame is not modern; it's from the 1980s. But the avionics, the weapon systems, the flight computer, all of those different components are very modern, very, very modern. And so to support modern piece of machinery that's, tens of millions of dollars in value, very, very expensive. It takes time to build out the logistical infrastructure and the operational infrastructure to be able to support that kind of weapon system. But as that comes online in the next 6 to 12 months, especially moving into next summer, you're going to see the Ukrainians starting to dominate the skies, because with the Danes and with the Dutch giving aircraft, that won't be the last of them. I guarantee you it will not be the last country sending modern fighter aircraft, fourth generation aircraft to Ukraine. It's a big deal, because the Ukrainians holding back the Russians are a matter of paramount importance to global security. The Russians would love to march into Ukraine, capture all of that equipment, then move right onto Poland and launch World War III, because Putin is that crazy and because he's that desperate, because if he loses this, he will be, I almost said martyred. He won't be martyred. He'll be much worse than martyred. He will become, if anybody knows, let me just put it like this. I'll give you a history. I'll give you some history to go and study. What will happen to him will probably be what ends up happening to Mussolini. All right. Good deal. Let's read chat for a little bit, and then we're going to wrap it out. Deep Diver, one of our newer members, is here. Thank you so much, Deep Diver. So many older people over 40 into crypto slightly, but not sold on it because of inherent values. As it becomes more mainstream, they will dive in. Yes, as Bitcoin becomes more mainstream, the older generations with a lot of money are going to jump into crypto. And also at the same time, every year that goes by, the younger people that grew up with crypto become the mainstream. They become the older people with the more money because they are moving forward in their careers. And you're going to see Bitcoin just kind of slowly get grandfathered into the system as the younger people have become such fans of it, and they get older and they make more money. They're going to be the ones that are leading the charge on that. All right. Let's see. Well, I really appreciate all of you guys tuning in. Make sure to hit that like button if you haven't already, and consider subscribing to the channel if you have not also already. Make sure to sign up for Lux Algo. You can use coupon code JEB30, JEBB30, for 30% off at checkout. That indicator called this crash. Just so you know, it gave you a day's warning that this was going to happen. And we talked about that here on this channel. So that's a good reason to subscribe to the channel, because you would have seen that we talked about how a correction was probably imminent. And I would encourage you to sign up for Lux Algo, because it was the indicator that we used to do so. You can use coupon code JEB30 and get the annual plan and save a ton of money every single month on Lux Algo. And it's going to help you to be able to trade and predict where markets are going next. Navessa just donated $50. This is your recommendation to Lorenzo CPA Services. They helped me solve huge crypto tax from 2021 and correct all the issues with multiple exchanges being crunched together. You were awesome, Jeb. Well, I'm so glad that we could help. Thank you, Navessa. Navasa. Thank you, Navasa, for that. TUI Enterprises said, I need Lux Algo. Crypto Guardian said, I gave you a like. Thank you so much. Really appreciate that. Deep Diver in chat. Did I miss it? No, I did not. Okay. For some reason, it says chat revenue is $52.35. This is a $50 donation. I don't know if I missed a super chat. Doesn't look like I did. All right, guys. Like I said, we're going to go ahead and wrap it out. Before I go, I do just first want to thank each and every single last one of you. And thank you to Navasa. Thank you guys so very much. Before I go, I do just first want to thank each and every single last one of you for watching, as always. And I will see you guys in the next video. Peace. Hello. Let's try that again.